The smell of antiseptic and the steady beeping of machines pulled me back to consciousness in the ambulance. Blood trickled down my forehead as paramedics worked frantically over my unconscious wife Sarah, her beautiful face pale and motionless on the stretcher. 8-year-old Jake sobbed quietly beside me, clutching his scraped arm. At the hospital, with shaking fingers, I typed into our family group chat, "We're in the hospital. My wife is in the ICU." Silence. Then my sister Amanda's reply appeared, shattering my world. "I hope she dies. She's always been such a witch to me." That moment changed everything. The ICU waiting room felt like purgatory. Those uncomfortable plastic chairs had become my entire universe for the past 6 hours, while doctors worked to save Sarah's life. Jake sat beside me, his small frame wrapped in a hospital blanket, occasionally wincing when he moved his bandaged arm. The accident kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. One moment we were driving home from Jake's soccer game, laughing about his winning goal. The next, a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into Sarah's side of our Honda Civic. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from the family chat. Each notification felt like another knife twisting in my chest. Marcus, my older brother, typed, "Sarah always thought she was better than us anyway." My mother, Patricia, added, "Maybe this is God's way of teaching her some humility, Stefan." Dad's message came next. "You should have married someone from our community instead of that outsider." The cruelty hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, potentially losing my wife, and my own family was celebrating her suffering. But what really destroyed me was reading through our family chat history from the past few years. How had I never noticed the pattern before? Every holiday, every family gathering, every milestone in our lives had been poisoned by their subtle cruelty towards Sarah. I remembered last Christmas when Sarah spent 3 days preparing homemade tamales for our family dinner, wanting to share her Mexican-American heritage with them. She'd worked so hard getting up at 5 in the morning to make the mesa from scratch. When we arrived, Amanda took one bite and announced loudly, "These taste weird. Why can't you just make normal food like everyone else?" Sarah's face had crumpled, but she'd smiled and said she'd remember that for next time. Or the time Sarah helped my unemployed cousin Danny find work at a tech startup, where she knew the hiring manager. She'd personally vouched for him, spent hours coaching him for the interview, and even bought him a new suit. When he got the job, my family never thanked Sarah. Instead, they said Danny succeeded despite her help, not because of it. The memories flooded back with painful clarity. Sarah organizing surprise birthday parties for family members who barely acknowledged her existence. Sarah paying for Amanda's car repairs when she was broke, only to have Amanda tell everyone that Stefan's wife thinks money can buy friendship. Sarah sitting quietly in corners during family gatherings, while they discussed their shared memories, deliberately excluding her from conversations. I pulled up more messages from today, my hands trembling as I read them. "Uncle Jerry, that girl never fit in with our family values." Cousin Beth, "I always wondered when Stefan would come to his senses about her." Aunt Linda, "Some people just aren't meant to be mothers." The last comment crushed me. Sarah had miscarried our second child 2 years ago, and we'd never told anyone except my parents, which meant they'd shared our private pain with the entire extended family, turning our tragedy into gossip. A gentle hand touched my shoulder. I looked up to see Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the ICU physician who'd been treating Sarah. Her kind brown eyes showed genuine concern as she sat down beside me. "Mr. Stefan, I wanted to update you on your wife's condition," she said softly. "The surgery went well, but there's significant brain swelling. We need to monitor her closely over the next 48 hours. Is she going to be okay?" The words came out as a whisper. "She's a fighter. The fact that she made it through surgery is encouraging. But I won't lie to you. The next few days are critical." Nurse Tom Bradley appeared with a cup of coffee and a sandwich. "You need to eat something," he said gently. Your son needs you strong. I looked at Jake, who was drawing with crayons a volunteer had brought him. His picture showed 3 stick figures in a car, but red crayon covered everything. My heart broke, seeing his trauma expressed so simply. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my college roommate David. Just heard about the accident. I'm driving up from Phoenix tonight. Whatever you need, brother. Then Sarah's best friend Maria from Chicago. On the next flight out, Sarah's going to pull through this. She's the strongest person I know. The contrast was stunning. My blood family celebrated Sarah's suffering while our chosen family rallied with love and support. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a separate group chat that I wasn't part of. I could see it in the thread notifications on Amanda's phone when she'd accidentally screenshotted something earlier. They had been talking about Sarah behind my back for years, and I'd never known. That's when Dr. Rodriguez, Jake's pediatrician, approached us with discharge papers. As he explained Jake's follow-up care, I overheard him talking to another doctor about family dynamics affecting patient recovery. It's remarkable how much family support impacts healing, he was saying. We see it all the time. Patients with loving families recover faster than those with toxic family situations. His words hit me like lightning. My family wasn't just being cruel. They were actively harming Sarah's chances of recovery with their hatred. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone rang. It was Amanda. "Stefan, we need to talk about Sarah's medical situation," she said without any greeting. "The family is concerned about the decisions you're making." "What are you talking about?" "We think you might be too emotional to make rational choices about her care. We've been discussing it, and we think the family should be more involved in medical decisions." The audacity took my breath away. "You just said you hoped she would die." "That was just venting frustration. We're worried about you and Jake. Maybe it would be better if Sarah's care was handled by people who can think clearly." I hung up without another word, but her meaning was crystal clear. They were planning something, and it involved taking control away from me during the worst moment of my life. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I started recording every conversation, screenshotting every message, and documenting every cruel word. If my family wanted to destroy the woman I loved while she fought for her life, they were about to learn that Stefan Rodriguez wasn't the pushover they thought he was. The transformation had begun, though I didn't realize it yet. I was about to discover just how deep my family's betrayal ran, and they were about to discover that some lines should never be crossed. The second day brought devastating news. Dr. Walsh's expression was grave as she pulled me aside during morning rounds. "Stefan, I need to be completely honest with you. The brain swelling hasn't decreased as much as we hoped. We're looking at possible surgical intervention to relieve the pressure." My legs nearly gave out. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we might need to perform a craniectomy, temporarily removing part of her skull to give her brain room to swell without causing permanent damage. It's a serious procedure, but it could save her life." Jake was staying with Maria, who had arrived on a red-eye flight from Chicago. Seeing her fierce loyalty to Sarah made me realize how much I'd failed my wife by not protecting her from my family's toxicity. Maria didn't mince words about what she thought of my relatives. "Stefan, I've watched Sarah cry after every family gathering for 5 years. She tried so hard to win their approval, and they treated her like garbage. The fact that they're showing their true colors now doesn't surprise me. It just confirms what we already knew." While I processed this emotional revelation, my work situation was falling apart. My software development business had been thriving before the accident, but now I was discovering the full extent of my family's sabotage. Harrison Wells, my biggest client and a longtime family friend, called with devastating news. "Stefan, I hate to add to your troubles right now, but I need to terminate our contract. Your brother Marcus told me some concerning things about your reliability and your commitment to the business. Said you'd been neglecting clients to focus on personal projects." My mouth fell open. "Harrison, that's completely untrue. You can check my work history. I've never missed a deadline or delivered subpar work. Well, your father also mentioned that you'd been drinking heavily and having marriage problems. Said the family was worried about your stability. The lies were so outrageous they took my breath away. I'd never been a heavy drinker, and Sarah and I had one of the strongest marriages I knew. But Harrison had known my family for 30 years, and their word carried weight with him. I understand you're getting your information from people you trust, but I need you to know that none of what they told you is accurate. However, I respect your decision. After hanging up, I did some quick calculations. The Harrison Wells contract was worth approximately $240,000 annually. Losing it would put serious financial strain on us right when medical bills were mounting and I couldn't work. But the betrayal cut deeper than money. My family had systematically undermined my livelihood while pretending to support my entrepreneurial dreams. How long had they been sabotaging me? I started making phone calls to other clients doing damage control. 3 more companies had received concerned family member calls questioning my stability and reliability. My Uncle Jerry, who worked in local construction, had been particularly busy, spreading rumors about my mental breakdown and inability to handle responsibility. Meanwhile, Jake was struggling with nightmares and separation anxiety. Every time I left his site, he panicked, convinced something terrible would happen to me too. Maria suggested we bring him to see Sarah, hoping it might help him process what was happening. The pediatric ICU had strict visiting policies, but Dr. Walsh made an exception when she saw Jake's drawings growing progressively darker and more violent. We prepared him carefully for what he'd see: the tubes, the machines, the stillness. When Jake saw his mother lying motionless in the hospital bed, he didn't cry. Instead, he climbed onto the chair beside her bed and started talking to her like she was fully awake. "Mom, I scored 2 goals in today's practice. Coach Peterson said my footwork is getting really good. Dad's been trying to help, but he's not as good at explaining the drills as you are." The nurse monitoring Sarah's vitals pointed out something remarkable. Her heart rate became more stable when Jake was talking. Her brain activity showed subtle improvements during his visits. "Family connection is incredibly powerful medicine," Dr. Walsh explained. "Even unconscious patients respond to familiar voices and loving touch." This made my family's absence even more painful. Jake kept asking why his grandparents hadn't come to see Mommy in the hospital. I didn't know how to explain that they were too busy celebrating her condition to offer support. David arrived that evening bringing genuine warmth and practical help. He'd organized a meal train through our mutual friends, set up a fundraising page to help with medical expenses, and arranged for Jake to stay with his family when I needed to be at the hospital overnight. "This is what family looks like," Maria said as we watched David patiently help Jake with homework in the hospital cafeteria. "People who show up when it matters." But while our chosen family rallied around us, my blood relatives were plotting something far worse than I could have imagined. I discovered their plan completely by accident. Stepping outside for fresh air around 10 o'clock that night, I heard familiar voices in the hospital parking garage. My parents were standing near their truck talking to Amanda and someone I didn't recognize. "The lawyer says we need documented evidence of his emotional instability," Amanda was explaining to the stranger. "Photos, witness statements, anything that shows he can't make rational medical decisions." "How long have you been planning this?" the man asked. "About 6 months," my father Robert replied. "Ever since Stefan started getting too successful with his business, we knew eventually he'd need to be brought back down to earth." My mother Patricia added, "Sarah's accident is unfortunate, but it gives us the opportunity to show Stefan that he needs family guidance. He's always been too independent for his own good." The stranger's voice became clearer as they moved closer to where I was hiding behind a concrete pillar. Medical power of attorney challenges are difficult, but if we can demonstrate that the current guardian is making decisions based on emotion rather than medical expertise, we have a case. "What about the boy?" Amanda asked. "If Stefan is declared incompetent to make medical decisions for his wife, It opens the door to questioning his parental fitness as well. The lawyer replied. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just planning to take control of Sarah's medical care. They were positioning themselves to take Jake away from me. I carefully used my phone to record the rest of their conversation, learning that this conspiracy had been months in the making. They'd been building a case against me long before the accident, documenting every moment I looked tired or stressed, every time I'd expressed frustration with work or family obligations. Amanda worked at Morrison Peterson and Associates, a law firm that specialized in family disputes and guardianship cases. She'd been collecting evidence of my unfitness as a husband and father, preparing for the day when they could swoop in and take control of my life. The most chilling part was hearing them discuss Sarah's condition with complete clinical detachment. If she doesn't survive, the custody question becomes simpler, Robert said matter-of-factly. Stefan will be a grieving single father who clearly can't handle the responsibility. And if she does survive but with significant impairment, she'll need long-term care that Stefan can't afford, especially after we've damaged his business relationships, Patricia added. They had orchestrated the destruction of my income specifically to create a crisis that would justify their intervention. The cruelty was breathtaking in its calculated precision. As they prepared to leave, I heard Amanda say something that stopped my heart. The accident timing was perfect. If we'd waited much longer, Stefan might have become too established to control. I waited until their car lights disappeared before emerging from my hiding spot, my mind reeling with implications. My family hadn't just failed to support us during a crisis. They were actively using our tragedy to destroy our lives. But they had made one critical mistake. They assumed I was still the passive, conflict-avoiding person I'd always been. They had no idea that watching my wife fight for her life while they plotted against us had awakened something fierce and protective in me. As I walked back toward the hospital, I was no longer Stefan the family peacekeeper. I was Stefan the protector, and I was about to show them exactly what that meant. The third day brought Sarah's first sign of improvement. Her eyes fluttered open for nearly 10 seconds, and she seemed to track movement with her gaze. Dr. Walsh was cautiously optimistic, explaining that brain injury recovery often happened in small, incremental steps. But while Sarah fought to return to us, I was uncovering the full scope of my family's betrayal through digital archaeology that would have made a forensic accountant proud. I started with Amanda's social media accounts, which I'd never really examined closely before. What I found made me physically sick. A private Instagram account with the handle Family First Amanda contained years of posts, mocking Sarah's appearance, her culture, her cooking, and her parenting style. The comments from other family members were even worse. A photo of Sarah holding baby Jake at his first birthday party had the caption, "When you have to pretend to love your sister-in-law's spawn." 37 family members had liked the post. A picture of Sarah bringing homemade soup to my grandmother during her illness was captioned, "Performance activism at its finest." Too bad Grandma saw right through the fake kindness. But the most devastating discovery was a group chat called Stefan Reality Check that included every adult family member except me. The conversation history went back 4 years and contained over 3,000 messages dedicated to tearing apart my marriage and planning my isolation. Some highlights that burned into my memory. Marcus. Stefan's gotten too big for his britches since he started that computer business. Time to remind him where he comes from. Uncle Jerry. Sarah's turned him against his own blood. That's what happens when you marry outside your culture. Amanda. I found out she had a miscarriage last year. Didn't even tell us until months later. Shows how she's driving a wedge between Stefan and his family. Cousin Beth. Maybe the miscarriage was a blessing. Do we really need more mixed kids in the family? The responses to Beth's comment were overwhelmingly supportive. My own family had celebrated the loss of my second child. But the most damaging discovery came when I found their shared Google Drive folder titled Stefan documentation. It contained hundreds of photos taken without my knowledge, recorded phone conversations, and detailed logs of my daily activities spanning 2 years. They had photos of me looking exhausted after pulling all-nighters to meet client deadlines captioned as evidence of substance abuse problems. They had recordings of me venting to Sarah about work stress edited to make me sound unstable. They had financial records they'd somehow obtained with notes about irresponsible spending on things like Jake's soccer equipment and Sarah's anniversary gift. Most disturbing was a document called Intervention Timeline that laid out their step-by-step plan to destroy my business, isolate me from support systems, and position themselves as the solution to problems they had created. Phase 1, sabotage business relationships through concerned family member calls to clients. Phase 2, document resulting financial stress as evidence of poor judgment. Phase 3, create or exploit crisis situations to demonstrate need for family intervention. Phase 4, use legal system to formalize family control over major life decisions. The accident had simply accelerated their timeline. I spent hours printing and organizing evidence, creating a comprehensive file of their conspiracy. But the more I learned, the more I realized how much damage they'd already done to Sarah's relationships with her own family. A deep dive into old email accounts revealed the truth about our wedding planning 3 years ago. I had wondered why Sarah's parents seemed so distant and uninvolved, leaving most decisions to us. I'd assumed they were respecting our independence or dealing with cultural differences. The reality was devastatingly different. I found emails my mother had sent to Sarah's parents, Manuel and Elena Rodriguez, explaining that Stefan preferred a small American wedding and that too much Mexican influence might make me uncomfortable. She'd told them that I'd specifically requested they not interfere with American customs and keep their involvement minimal. Sarah's parents, being respectful people who didn't want to cause problems in their daughter's marriage, had stepped back. They'd thought they were honoring my wishes, when actually they were being manipulated by my mother's racism. This explained so much about Sarah's sadness during our engagement period. She'd felt abandoned by both families. Mine openly hostile, hers seemingly indifferent. I'd been too focused on managing my own family's behavior to realize she was suffering from a deliberate campaign of isolation. I found similar email exchanges surrounding Jake's birth, Sarah's miscarriage, and every major milestone in our lives. My family had systematically prevented Sarah from receiving support from her loved ones, while simultaneously portraying themselves as the only people who truly cared about our well-being. The financial sabotage was equally extensive. Beyond the Harrison Wells contract, they'd interfered with 6 other business relationships. Uncle Jerry, who worked in construction, had told potential clients that I was unreliable and abandoning family responsibilities. Cousin Danny, the one Sarah had helped find employment, had told his new colleagues that my software services were overpriced and that I was difficult to work with. The lost revenue totaled approximately $450,000 over 18 months. They had systematically destroyed my livelihood while pretending to support my entrepreneurial dreams. But the most chilling discovery was evidence that the car accident might not have been entirely accidental. I found text messages from my father pressuring me to drive his old pickup truck that day instead of Sarah's Honda Civic. He'd claimed my car needed family bonding time, and that real men drive trucks, not girly cars. I'd refused, thinking he was just being his usual controlling self. What I learned from his mechanic was that the truck's brake line had been showing signs of wear for weeks. Robert knew about the problem but hadn't repaired it, telling the mechanic he'd handle it later. If we'd been in that truck when the drunk driver hit us, the brake failure could have made the accident fatal. I couldn't prove they'd planned the accident, but the evidence suggested they'd at least been reckless with our safety, while positioning themselves to benefit from any resulting crisis. As I sat in the hospital parking garage at 2 a.m. organizing evidence and planning my response, I felt something I'd never experienced before: the cold, clear focus of someone who'd been pushed too far. My family had spent years systematically destroying my wife's happiness, my financial stability, and my relationships. They'd celebrated our tragedies, sabotaged our successes, and exploited our crisis for their own benefit. They'd planned to use my wife's potential death or disability to take control of my son's life. They thought they were dealing with the same passive Stefan, who'd always tried to keep peace at any cost. They were about to discover their mistake. I started making phone calls to lawyers, investigators, and financial experts. If my family wanted a war, they were about to get one. But this time, I'd be fighting on my own terms, with weapons they'd never seen coming. The transformation was complete. Stefan the peacekeeper was dead. In his place stood Stefan the protector, and he was ready to burn down everything that threatened his family's future. Sarah's condition continued improving slowly. By day 5, she was staying awake for longer periods and responding to simple commands. Dr. Walsh was cautiously optimistic about avoiding surgery, though she warned that recovery would be a marathon, not a sprint. Jake's spirits lifted dramatically when Sarah squeezed his hand during one of his visits. He spent 20 minutes telling her about everything he'd learned at school, convinced she was fully listening, even though she couldn't respond yet. While Sarah fought her way back to consciousness, I was building my counterattack with the precision of a software engineer debugging faulty code. Every element had to be perfect, every vulnerability identified and exploited. My first ally came from an unexpected source. Catherine Morrison, a family law attorney specializing in abuse cases, had been recommended by David. When I explained the situation during our initial consultation, her expression grew increasingly serious. Stefan, what you're describing isn't just family dysfunction, it's organized psychological warfare, she said, reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. The systematic nature of this behavior, the documentation they've kept, the coordinated attacks on your livelihood, this meets the legal definition of conspiracy and harassment. She explained that my family's plan to challenge my medical power of attorney and parental fitness actually gave us significant leverage. They've created a paper trail of their malicious intent. Most custody challenges fail because they lack clear evidence of unfitness, but their own documentation proves they're acting from malice, not genuine concern for the child's welfare. Catherine introduced me to Dr. Rachel Chen, a forensic psychologist who specialized in family abuse dynamics. After reviewing the evidence, Dr. Chen confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. This is a textbook case of multi-generational family narcissism and scapegoating. Sarah was targeted because she represented independence and success that threatened the family power structure. Their escalation during her medical crisis is predictable. They view this as their best opportunity to regain control. But my most valuable ally emerged when Catherine connected me with FBI agent Brian Murphy, who'd been investigating construction industry corruption in our area. When I showed him the financial evidence of my family's business practices, his interest was immediately piqued. Construction fraud is a major focus for us right now, Agent Murphy explained. Your family's business has actually been on our radar for tax issues, but we haven't had enough evidence to proceed. What you've uncovered could be the key to a larger investigation. My Uncle Jerry's company had been bidding on municipal contracts with suspiciously low estimates, then charging massive overruns once work began. They'd been bribing building inspectors to overlook safety violations and using undocumented workers to avoid payroll taxes. Agent Murphy was particularly interested in a pattern of workplace accidents at family job sites that had resulted in significant insurance payouts. 3 workers have died on Jerry's construction sites in the past 2 years, he explained. In each case, safety equipment that should have prevented the accidents was either missing or defective. The insurance companies paid out nearly $2 million total. The evidence suggested my family's business wasn't just ethically corrupt. They were literally profiting from preventable deaths. Meanwhile, Maria had been conducting her own investigation from a different angle, As an HR director for a major corporation, she understood workplace dynamics and networking effects. Stefan, your family didn't just attack Sarah. They attacked anyone who supported her, Maria explained. I've been calling people from her social circle, and the stories I'm hearing are horrifying. Sarah's friend Jessica, who'd hosted her bridal shower, had been deliberately excluded from family events after Amanda told everyone she was trying to influence Sarah against family traditions. Sarah's former co-worker, Monica, had been told by my mother that Sarah talked badly about her friends behind their backs and shouldn't be trusted with personal information. Even Sarah's book club had been targeted. Amanda had joined the group specifically to spread rumors about Sarah's character and loyalty. The systematic isolation had been so thorough that Sarah barely had any close friendships left outside of Maria and a few college friends who lived out of state. My family had effectively cut her off from local support systems, while I remained obliviously focused on managing their overt hostility. But the most devastating revelation came when Maria contacted Sarah's parents directly, something I'd been hesitant to do because of the language barrier and my assumption that they'd been informed about the accident. They hadn't been told anything. Manuel and Elena Rodriguez were horrified to learn their daughter had been in the ICU for nearly a week without their knowledge. They'd been waiting for updates that never came, assuming we were managing the crisis privately, as American families sometimes do. When Maria explained the full situation, including my family's cruelty and their history of blocking communication, Sarah's parents immediately boarded a plane from San Antonio. We thought Stefan's family was caring for Sarah and that we should respect their ways. Elena explained through tears when they arrived. We didn't want to interfere or cause problems for our daughter's marriage. The reunion was emotionally overwhelming. Sarah's parents brought photo albums, homemade food, and the kind of warm, unconditional love that made Jake light up immediately. Within hours, our hospital room was transformed from a sterile medical space into a family gathering place. Sarah's uncle Tony, a former Marine who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, was less diplomatic about his feelings regarding my relatives. Family protects family, he said simply. What your people did ain't family behavior. It's enemy action, and enemies get dealt with accordingly. While Sarah's real family rallied around us, I was putting the final pieces of my legal strategy into place. The beauty of my plan was its comprehensiveness. Instead of fighting my family's attacks one by one, I was preparing to devastate them on multiple fronts simultaneously. Catherine had filed emergency protective orders based on the recorded conversations and threat documentation. Agent Murphy was preparing federal charges for tax fraud and workplace safety violations. The state licensing board was investigating Amanda's ethical violations related to her conflict of interest in targeting her own brother. But the masterstroke was a civil lawsuit that would destroy them financially while protecting our future. We were suing for business interference, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy. The damages included lost income, medical expenses, pain and suffering, and punitive awards. The total amount we were seeking was $2.7 million, enough to ensure Sarah's complete recovery care and Jake's college education while bankrupting the people who'd tried to destroy us. My family had no idea what was coming. They still thought they were manipulating a grieving, overwhelmed victim who would eventually surrender control to avoid further conflict. They were about to learn that the biggest mistake you can make is threatening someone's family, when that someone finally stops caring about keeping the peace. The war was about to begin, and I'd spent 5 days preparing for total victory. Sarah's 8th day in the hospital brought the miracle we'd been praying for. She woke up fully alert and spoke her first words since the accident. "Where's Jake?" Her voice was weak and raspy, but her mind was clear. The relief was so overwhelming that I actually collapsed into the chair beside her bed. Dr. Walsh was amazed by her rapid improvement once Sarah's family arrived. Family support really does accelerate healing, she explained. Mrs. Rodriguez is benefiting enormously from having loving people around her. But while Sarah began her physical recovery, I was launching the opening salvos of my counterattack against the people who'd tried to destroy us. The first phase went into effect at exactly 9 a.m. on Monday morning. Catherine Morrison filed emergency protective orders against my entire immediate family, citing the recorded conversations and documented harassment. The orders prohibited them from contacting me, Sarah, or Jake, and from coming within 500 feet of our home, the hospital, or Jake's school. By 10 a.m., FBI agents were executing search warrants at 3 family business locations. Agent Murphy had assembled enough evidence of tax fraud and safety violations to justify immediate action. The construction company's assets were frozen pending investigation. Amanda was the first to realize something was wrong. She called my phone at 10:30, her voice frantic. "Stefan, what the hell is going on? Federal agents just raided Dad's office and Uncle Jerry's job site. They're asking questions about you and Sarah." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I replied calmly, enjoying the panic in her voice. Maybe their business practices finally caught up with them. "This is about that recording, isn't it? You've been planning this." "Amanda, I'm legally prohibited from discussing anything with you. All communications need to go through my attorney." The silence on her end was satisfying. For the first time in years, she had no clever comeback, no manipulation to deploy. By noon, the local news was covering the federal raid on prominent local construction company under investigation for fraud and safety violations. The story included quotes from families of workers who died in preventable accidents finally getting the justice they deserved. But the real satisfaction came when Harrison Wells called me personally. "Stefan, I owe you a massive apology. I just learned that your family deliberately lied to me about your character and reliability. I've also discovered some concerning information about their business practices that makes me question everything they told me." "I appreciate the call, Harrison. I understand you were acting on information you believe to be credible. I'd like to reinstate our contract immediately with a bonus payment to compensate for the disruption they caused. What they did to your business while your wife was fighting for her life is unconscionable." By end of business Monday, 3 other clients had called with similar apologies and contract renewals. The financial sabotage was being reversed as word spread about my family's true nature. Tuesday brought even better news. Amanda's law firm, Morrison, Peterson and Associates, had been contacted by the State Bar Association regarding her ethics violations. Using her position to target family members for personal gain was grounds for disbarment, especially when combined with evidence of her participation in business fraud. The firm moved quickly to protect their reputation, announcing Amanda's immediate termination and cooperation with the ongoing investigation. And we had no knowledge of Ms. Rodriguez's inappropriate use of firm resources for personal vendettas. Their statement read, "We maintain the highest ethical standards and cannot tolerate this behavior." Amanda's legal career was effectively over. But the most devastating blow came Wednesday, when the IRS joined the federal investigation. Agent Murphy's evidence had triggered a comprehensive audit of all family business entities going back 7 years. I received a call from the lead IRS investigator, Agent Sarah Chen. "Mr. Rodriguez, your documentation has been invaluable in uncovering what appears to be systematic tax evasion. We estimate the total amount owed in back taxes, penalties, and interest to exceed $400,000. My family's assets were being frozen faster than they could hide them. Bank accounts, real estate vehicles, business equipment. Everything was being seized as collateral for their mounting legal problems. Meanwhile, Sarah was making remarkable progress. Physical therapy had begun, and while she tired easily, her cognitive function was completely intact. When I finally told her everything that had happened, the family's cruelty, their plots, and my response, her reaction surprised me. "I'm proud of you for finally fighting back," she said, squeezing my hand. "I've been waiting 5 years for you to see them clearly. Why didn't you push harder for me to cut them off?" Because you had to reach that conclusion yourself. If I'd forced the issue, you might have resented me for turning you against your family. Now you know exactly who they are, based on their own actions. Sarah's wisdom reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Even after everything they'd put her through, she understood the psychological dynamics better than I did. Jake was thriving with his maternal grandparents' attention. Manuel taught him Spanish phrases while Elena shared family recipes and stories. The contrast with my family's toxic behavior couldn't have been more stark. Abuelito says family means protecting each other, not hurting each other, Jake told me one evening. Why didn't our other grandparents understand that? How do you explain multi-generational dysfunction to an 8-year-old? I settled for, some people don't know how to love properly, buddy. That's why we're learning better ways to be a family. By Thursday, my family was desperate enough to attempt direct contact despite the restraining orders. Marcus showed up at the hospital apparently believing he could charm his way into reconciliation. Hospital security stopped him at the entrance, but not before I got to see the fear in his eyes. The federal investigation was expanding to include all family businesses, and Marcus's landscaping company was being audited for similar tax violations. Stefan, we can work this out as a family, he called out as security escorted him away. You don't understand what you're destroying, but I understood perfectly. I was destroying a system of abuse that had poisoned my marriage, traumatized my wife, and threatened my son's future. The only regret I had was not doing it sooner. Friday brought the most satisfying development yet. Agent Murphy called with an update that made me smile for the first time in days. We've discovered evidence that your father knew about the brake problems in that truck he wanted you to drive the day of your accident. He told his mechanic to delay repairs because he needed to teach Stefan a lesson about family vehicles. While I couldn't prove they'd planned the accident, the evidence clearly showed reckless endangerment. Criminal charges were being filed for knowingly allowing an unsafe vehicle on the road. Sarah was being discharged Sunday after just 9 days in the hospital. Her recovery had been miraculous, according to Dr. Walsh, who attributed much of her progress to the loving support system that had surrounded her. As we prepared for her homecoming, I reflected on how completely the situation had reversed. 10 days ago, my family thought they were exploiting our tragedy to seize control of our lives. Now they were facing federal criminal charges, financial ruin, and complete social exile. But their suffering was just beginning. The most devastating phase of my plan hadn't even started yet. Sarah's homecoming was everything I dreamed of during those dark hospital nights. Our house filled with flowers from friends and colleagues, homemade food from Sarah's family, and the sound of Jake's laughter as he showed his mother all the get well cards his classmates had made. The contrast with my blood family's absence was stark but no longer painful. We were surrounded by people who loved us genuinely, not people who demanded our loyalty while plotting our destruction. But peace was temporary. My family's desperate final gambit was about to unfold, and it would be more vicious than anything they'd attempted before. It started Monday morning when Jake's school called with alarming news. Mr. Rodriguez, your sister, attempted to pick up Jake this morning, claiming there was a family emergency. When we asked for verification, she became hostile and demanding. Our security cameras captured her trying to gain unauthorized access to the playground during recess. My blood ran cold. Amanda was desperate enough to attempt kidnapping exactly as I'd predicted. But unlike the old Stefan who would have been caught off guard, I was prepared. Thank you for following protocol. We have restraining orders against all my family members. Please contact the police immediately and share any security footage with them. I'd already briefed Jake's school about the situation and provided them with photos of family members who were prohibited from contact. The attempted kidnapping was being captured on multiple security cameras with timestamp evidence. But Amanda's desperation didn't stop there. That afternoon, she posted on social media claiming I was holding Sarah and Jake hostage and preventing the family from helping during their time of need. She painted herself as a concerned aunt, being cruelly shut out by a mentally unstable brother-in-law. The post gained some traction until Maria and David began sharing the actual facts, including photos of the federal agents raiding family businesses and copies of the restraining orders. Amanda's narrative collapsed when people realized she was the one under criminal investigation. Meanwhile, the federal case was expanding beyond anything I'd originally imagined. Agent Murphy called with updates that stunned even me. "Stefan, we've uncovered evidence of a multi-generational criminal enterprise. Your family has been running insurance fraud schemes for over 20 years. Those workplace accidents weren't accidents. They were deliberate insurance claims." The pattern was horrifying. Family members would deliberately create dangerous conditions, then file massive insurance claims when workers were injured or killed. They'd collected over $3 million in fraudulent payouts over 2 decades. "We also found evidence that your Uncle Jerry has been laundering money through multiple business entities. The construction company was just the front for a much larger operation. My family wasn't just ethically corrupt. They were career criminals who'd built their entire lifestyle on fraud and violence." But the most devastating revelation came when Agent Chen from the IRS explained the full scope of their tax crimes. They'd been operating a cash business for years, reporting only about 30% of their actual income. When we factor in penalties and interest, they owe the government approximately $700,000. Every asset they owned was being seized. Houses, cars, business equipment, bank accounts. Everything was gone. My parents would lose the home they'd lived in for 25 years. Uncle Jerry's construction empire would be liquidated to pay creditors and victims. Wednesday brought the courtroom confrontation I'd been anticipating. My family's lawyer had requested an emergency hearing to challenge the restraining orders, claiming they were based on misunderstandings, and that I was preventing them from supporting family during crisis. Catherine Morrison had prepared meticulously for this moment. When Judge Harold Peterson asked for evidence supporting the restraining orders, she presented a devastating case. The recorded conversations played in open court, letting everyone hear Amanda's cruel comments about hoping Sarah would die and the family's conspiracy to steal my medical power of attorney. The financial evidence showed systematic business sabotage designed to create crisis situations they could exploit. The attempted kidnapping was supported by school security footage and witness testimony. Most damning was the insurance fraud evidence, which Agent Murphy presented as part of an ongoing federal investigation. My family sat in stunned silence as their crimes were laid bare in public record. The local newspaper reporter taking notes would ensure their shame was preserved for posterity. When Judge Peterson asked if they had any defense for their behavior, their lawyer could only mumble about family misunderstandings and emotional reactions during stressful times. "Your Honor, attempting to kidnap a child is not a misunderstanding," Catherine replied. "Conspiring to steal medical decision-making authority from an injured person's spouse is not an emotional reaction. These are calculated crimes that demonstrate ongoing danger to my clients." Judge Peterson's ruling was swift and comprehensive. The restraining orders were made permanent. Amanda was ordered to undergo psychological evaluation. All family members were prohibited from any contact with Jake, including at school events or public gatherings. But the legal victory was overshadowed by something even more satisfying: watching my family's public humiliation unfold. By Thursday, the local news had picked up the insurance fraud story. Headlines like "Local Construction Dynasty Built on Fraud" and "Family Business Linked to Worker Deaths" dominated the local media cycle. My parents' church asked them to step down from leadership positions. The charity organizations they'd used to build their public reputation severed all ties. Business partners and social contacts distanced themselves as quickly as possible. Robert's confrontation with a news reporter outside the courthouse was captured on video and went viral locally. His violent outburst and profanity-laced threats against the media only confirmed everyone's worst suspicions about his character. But the most satisfying moment came Friday evening, when my father showed up at our house, despite the restraining orders. I was prepared for this. Security cameras captured him approaching our property, and I'd already alerted the police. But I wanted to face him directly to let him see what he'd created. "Stefan, you're destroying our family," he said through the front door. "All this over some misunderstanding about Sarah." I opened the door calmly, staying on my side of the threshold, while the recording app captured everything. "Robert, there's no misunderstanding. You celebrated my wife's suffering. You tried to steal my son. You sabotaged my business and planned to have me declared incompetent. These aren't family disagreements. They're crimes. Family sticks together through difficult times. You've chosen outsiders over your own blood. I've chosen people who love my family over people who tried to destroy it. Sarah has been part of this family for 5 years, but you never accepted her. Jake is your grandson, but you were ready to traumatize him to control me." Police sirens approached in the distance. "You don't understand what you've lost," Robert said desperately. "We were trying to help you." "No, you were trying to control me. And when I became too successful and independent, you decided to destroy everything I'd built. The only thing I've lost is the illusion that blood relation guarantees love." The police arrested him for violating the restraining order, adding another charge to his growing list of legal problems. As I watched them lead away the man who'd raised me, I felt no sadness, only the deep satisfaction of finally protecting my family from the people who'd spent years trying to hurt them. Sarah had watched the confrontation from our living room window, still moving slowly but growing stronger every day. "How do you feel?" she asked as I locked the door behind the police cars. "Free," I replied. "For the first time in my life, completely free." The war was over, and we'd won decisively. But the victory wasn't just legal or financial. It was psychological. I'd finally become the husband and father my family deserved, someone willing to fight for them, regardless of the cost. Tomorrow would bring the final chapter of our story, and it would be beautiful. 6 months later, I was sitting in our backyard, watching Jake teach his abuelito Manuel how to kick soccer goals, while Elena and Sarah planned our upcoming Christmas dinner. The scene was everything I'd dreamed of during those dark hospital nights. A family surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported each other. Sarah had made a complete recovery with no lasting effects from her brain injury. Her physical therapy had ended 2 months ago, and she was back to her old energetic self, perhaps even stronger than before. The experience had taught us both what really mattered in life, and we'd built our new existence around those priorities. Jake was thriving with his maternal grandparents' constant presence. They'd moved from San Antonio to a house just 15 minutes away, giving him the stable, loving extended family he deserved. His nightmares about the accident had faded, replaced by happy dreams about soccer games and family adventures. The legal aftermath of my counterattack had exceeded even my expectations. Amanda received an 18-month federal prison sentence for fraud and attempted kidnapping. Robert was serving a 5-year sentence for tax evasion, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. Uncle Jerry faced 7 years for running the criminal enterprise that had killed 3 workers and defrauded insurance companies of millions. My mother, Patricia, avoided prison time due to her age and health issues, but she'd lost everything else. Their house was seized by the IRS, their social standing was destroyed, and their remaining children had distanced themselves to protect their own reputations. Marcus had fled to another state to escape the investigation, abandoning his own family and business. The last I'd heard, he was working construction in Nevada under an assumed name. The financial settlements had been equally satisfying. Our civil lawsuit resulted in a $2.4 million judgment against the family estate. Most of that money was tied up in seized assets, but we'd received enough to cover all of Sarah's medical expenses and establish a college fund for Jake. More importantly, my business had not only recovered, but expanded dramatically. The story of how I'd protected my family while building a legal case against organized fraud had attracted significant media attention. 3 major corporations had reached out with contract offers, impressed by my integrity during crisis. Harrison Wells had become more than a client. He was now a friend and business mentor who'd helped me expand into government contracting. The same skills I'd used to document my family's crimes had proven invaluable for forensic accounting projects. But the greatest satisfaction came from our daily life. Sarah and I had grown closer. Through shared adversity, our marriage stronger than ever. We'd learned to communicate more openly about problems, instead of hoping they'd resolve themselves. Jake had learned important lessons about real family relationships. He understood that love meant protection and support, not manipulation and control. When classmates complained about strict parents, Jake would say, "At least they care enough to set rules. That means they want you to be safe." Sarah's family had welcomed me completely, showing me what healthy family dynamics looked like. Manuel taught me woodworking in his garage workshop, while Elena shared family recipes and stories. Uncle Tony had become Jake's unofficial bodyguard and male role model, teaching him that real strength meant protecting people smaller than yourself. The contrast with my blood family's toxic dysfunction was stark, but no longer painful. I'd grieved the family I'd wished I had, and embraced the family I'd chosen. Our social circle had expanded dramatically once the truth about my relatives became public. People who'd been afraid to get close because of my family's reputation now felt comfortable building genuine friendships with us. Sarah had joined a book club, started volunteering at Jake's school, and was considering returning to college to finish her nursing degree. The community had rallied around us in ways that restored my faith in human nature. Jake's soccer team parents had organized fundraisers for his college fund. My business networking group had referred dozens of new clients. Even strangers who'd read about our story in the news would approach us with words of support and encouragement. Dr. Walsh still checked on Sarah's progress occasionally, always amazed by her complete recovery. "Family support really is the best medicine," she'd say. "You're living proof of that principle." The legal system had delivered justice, but the real victory was psychological. I'd finally become the protector my family needed, someone willing to fight for them, regardless of personal cost. The passive conflict-avoiding Stefan was gone forever, replaced by someone who understood that sometimes love requires warfare. Sarah often said the accident was the best, worst thing that ever happened to us. It had revealed my family's true nature while teaching us to value what really mattered. Without that crisis, we might have continued enduring their abuse indefinitely. Jake's 8th grade graduation was approaching, and he'd been selected as class valedictorian. His speech topic was real family, focusing on how the people who choose to love you matter more than the people who share your DNA. "Blood doesn't make you family," he'd written. "Love makes you family, protection makes you family. Being there when someone needs you makes you family." The wisdom of that 8-year-old amazed everyone who heard his speech rehearsals. He'd learned through experience what many adults never understand. As I watched my son laugh with his grandfather, while my wife planned tomorrow's activities with her mother, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain had been excruciating, the battles had been exhausting, but the outcome was everything we'd ever wanted. We'd built a life surrounded by people who genuinely loved us, free from the toxicity that had poisoned our early years together. Jake would grow up understanding healthy relationship dynamics, equipped to choose his own family wisely when the time came. The business was thriving, our finances were secure, and our future was bright. But most importantly, we were happy. Deeply, genuinely happy in a way that had seemed impossible during those dark family gatherings of the past. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it arrives, the satisfaction is worth every moment of suffering that preceded it. My family had tried to destroy us during our darkest hour, and in response, I'd shown them what real family protection looked like. As the sun set over our backyard barbecue, I realized that this was what victory looked like. Not revenge or domination, but peace, love. and the quiet satisfaction of building something beautiful from the ashes of what came before. Looking at everyone I loved gathered together in safety and happiness, I understood that the best revenge against people who try to destroy your family is building an even stronger family in spite of them. And that's exactly what we've done. Have you ever had to cut toxic family members out of your life to protect the people you love? What advice would you give to someone struggling with similar family dynamics? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with anyone who might need to hear about the importance of choosing family wisely. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and building the life you deserve. Thank you for listening to our journey, and remember, real family means protection, not destruction. Until next time, keep fighting for the people who truly matter.